My husband, 6'4", handsome man. He's so bright. He's the smartest man I've ever met. And he has it all. Friends, the house, wife, born a girl, great family. But unfortunately, what he didn't have was his self-love. Unfortunately, my husband, in March 2022, he died by suicide. We are in Maui, the most beautiful place, most healing place. And my husband was struggling that week because he was saying his last goodbye to his dad, who was terminally ill. He was in litigation 7 years, and he learned that we had lost. So it was just one thing after another. The day before, he says, let's go snorkeling. He was smiling. He was having fun. We had a barbecue on the beach. There was so much hope in my eyes, and I know my kids' eyes. He looks at me. He's like, when we go home, let's get some books about marriage and let's read a chapter every night. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. I felt so happy. I felt that he sees the love. There's so much hope. And we go to sleep that night. And the next morning I get up and I see him on his phone, but there's something more than that, and I will never forget that feeling. I felt this intense darkness. He loved doing jujitsu, and he says, well, around 12 o'clock, I'm gonna go there for an hour session. I'm like, great, that's fantastic, because it's so good for him. And I said, well, I'll take the kids down to the beach. And as I see my kids swimming in the ocean, there was a wave, an angel, something told me to pick up my phone and tell my husband that I love him. So I picked it up and I told him, I said, I love you and thank you for the beautiful day yesterday. He said, don't come up, send security. And that was it. I grabbed the kids. It took us less than 5 minutes. And I paused for a second and just prayed to God to protect me for whatever I was going to see. And I went in and I did find my husband, and he had already hurt himself.
Thank you for listening to the Generational Health Podcast. Today, I had the opportunity to sit down with Melissa Methven. We had a very emotional conversation about a unique experience that happened to her and the loss of a loved one. This was an emotional podcast. It was raw. It was real. We talked a lot about just the challenges of overcoming loss in family, how to cope with it, and the strategies that worked for her. So I think you'll really enjoy this one. As always, would like to thank our sponsor, Hiva Health, for making this podcast possible. You can check them out at www.hivahealth.com. They offer a wide range of treatments from medical weight loss, hormone replacement, to general longevity. As always, thank you for tuning in. We're live now. Okay. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Melissa Methven.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I said Methven right. All right. I practiced before.
It's a mouthful. I get Methven.
Well, when people were asking me, okay, well, who's coming on, this week, whatever. And I was just like, Melissa Gratitude. Yes. That's how I know you is Melissa Gratitude. So honestly, I hadn't even read your last name yet because I just know you as Melissa Gratitude.
I love that because that's my whole motto, every day, just have so much gratitude. Everything's a gift. Yeah.
Well, you're awesome. Thanks for coming in. I've followed along a little bit of your journey and listened to some other podcasts with you on it. And just really grateful that you take the time to come in here.
Absolutely.
So maybe lay the groundwork here before we get into some details. Why don't you just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from? That was something I learned from one of your other podcasts. We might actually know some of the same people. Mm-hmm. And how you got here today.
Yeah, I'd love to share. Well, I'm originally from Quebec City, Canada. And so I'm French Canadian. Then my mom and we moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I learned English and, I had a fairly good upbringing. And I met my husband when I was 23 and he lived up in Alaska. So then I lived in 16 years in Wasilla, Alaska, which my friends thought, well, Melissa and Alaska, I like palm trees and beaches. So, and that's where I met my husband, and he was a dentist. Went into dental hygienist field of work. At the time I was a flight attendant actually, and doing my college studies, and I was flying all over the world on private jets with ex-presidents and celebrities and doing this kind of fun. It was just a dream job, but I always knew it was just for a little while. So I went into dental hygiene for more my, as a profession. And, we were so young when we met each other, my husband and I, but I think there's something that we both did really well is hid behind our smiles, and we suppressed a lot of emotions. From a young age, I was taught to not cry, and that was uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I just learned to smile through life, and hide my true emotions. And that came into my marriage as well. We had a lot of things in common as far as going to concerts and common friends. And my husband was a fantastic dentist. He was definitely very generous, but I saw right out in the beginning how dentistry really uh, was really tough profession. You go in and everyone, a lot of fear and anxiety, and he wanted to hold that pain for them. And I think the more he gave and gave and gave, he was kind of giving out of an empty bucket. He never gave back so much to himself. So then when it came back to me, and when we had our children, there was nothing else to give. Once we come back home, he was just numbing out on the phone and really disconnected. I saw the introduction of opioids for pain meds be introduced really early on in his profession, just because he worked 6 days a week. So it was just a slow spiraling as far as his mental health. Unfortunately, my husband in March 2022, he died by suicide. And since then, I've been using my voice to kind of share our story, because I said, this is hard-earned wisdom. I don't want anyone to go through that path, let alone the children. I saw the pain that my kids had. The day they were there, when we found my husband, they were there. Luckily, they did not see their dad, but I did. And I know the tremendous amount of pain that you hold when you see your loved one in that depth of pain and decide to leave. And ultimately, I think because they just truly feel like they're a burden and they're better off gone. But I'm here to share that that's not the way to go. There is always hope. And luckily, I dove into just my own healing. I was told by an organ donor, and everything happened in Maui. We were there to say our last goodbye to his father, and I had an organ donor tell me, you need to take care of yourself first, because your kids will co-regulate with you and watch you grieve. And that's truly what I did. I just one step forward, learned about breathwork and counseling and different modalities of therapy, cold plunging, red light therapy, just taking care of my body. I also knew to avoid alcohol for almost a year. I was almost scared of it because I knew it's a depressant, and I had to kind of stay above water, and it was hard. I had a lot of gut issues. From years of suppression of my emotion and living kind of in that fear with my husband, seeing him spiral, and I didn't know what else to do. And he would not reach out for help. So I just kind of suppressed all that emotion, and it really living in that fear, it wrecked my gut. I had a severe acid reflux. I started having a cyst in my vocal cord where I had to surgically have it removed and not talk for 3 weeks after that, and losing my hair. And I was always told, oh, maybe it's your hormones. At the time I was, maybe 37, 36, having these symptoms. I'm like, well, this is not premenopause, and so it didn't make sense. But nobody out of all the professionals, I saw 2 ENTs, I saw even some naturopath, nobody said, oh, are you under a lot of stress? What's going on at home? I saw some therapists, and nobody kind of tied the two together, that suppression and the gut issues and the parasites. And even now I've gone down the road of our environment, our house environment, how we had mold and how that played a role in our mental health. So it's been quite a journey, because I like to ask questions like, well, why? When my husband passed, I said, well, why did I not fall but he did? What was I doing differently? And I started reading books about other people who got out of the dark, got out of the addictions, got out of just most horrid traumas. What were they doing? And I started seeing a common thread of waking up in prayer, meditation, gratitude. That's why Melissa Gratitude, waking up and finding something to be grateful for, no matter what. And now I can honestly say, I can look at what happened to my husband and I could say, I am grateful for the lessons, because that's what it is. Now I could use my voice and share that lesson. And I have a story, and it's very traumatic. A lot of people wouldn't come out of what I saw and what my children did. People look at my kids, they're like, wow, they're thriving. And I said, yes, but we keep digging and finding out what are the toolbox that we need to get us out of the dark. And of course, being of service is a big one. So me being able to share my story, I've realized through my book, The Truth Behind the Smiles, that sharing my whole truth allowed others to come up to me and share their truth. And that's been just that alone keeps me ignited to keep going. I now started a podcast as well, Not Alone with Melissa Methven, because I was hearing so many stories that needed to be shared as well, because I knew mine was impactful and saving lives, giving hope. I have a lot of other mothers who had lost their husbands to suicide, and they have young kids, and I've inspired them to just keep moving forward and seeing that our kids are doing well. What are we doing? And now they want to write a book. They want to start a podcast. And I said, yes, do it, because this has been so powerful for me. So powerful to write this book. I tell everybody to write a book for themselves. It's very healing to journal. It's a way to release it. You don't have to hold it, because I saw what suppression does. And my husband, 6'4", handsome man. He's so bright. He's the smartest man I ever met. And he has it all. Friends, the house, wife, born a girl, great family. But unfortunately, what he didn't have was his self-love. The confidence, even though it was hidden, I think since a young boy, I think his self-talk was never good. I think he was really hard on himself from a very young boy, had to be perfect, especially the trade of dentistry. It's very minute, detailed, and he's very good at root canals and all of that. And it's perfection. And it's never good enough. And it's the what's next. And I think that really was the foundation, is that he had to really go within and start working on himself.
There's a couple parts to your story, and I appreciate you sharing that. I know that you gave us a very summarized version of what happened, because I've heard a more detailed version. There's a couple parts of it that I was hoping we could maybe pull out a little bit and explore, just because there were some really good lessons I learned from them, and I just wanted to bring them up. So would you mind telling the audience kind of the day, like what you did as a family the day before, and kind of the transition from the day before to the day after when you texted him?
Yeah,
right?
I'd love to share, because if I think of just even a text of a woman that I heard today, is that a suicide survivor, you feel the guilt that you didn't see all the signs. Well, for example, we are in Maui, most beautiful place, most healing place. And my husband was struggling that week because he was saying his last goodbye to his dad, who was terminally ill. He was in litigation 7 years, and he learned that we had lost. So now he'd have to pay the money that he really thought he wouldn't have to. So it was just one thing after another. Well, the day before, he says, let's go snorkeling. Let's go visit some friends that we know on Lanai. And I was shocked, because we were ready to just kind of be with him and love on him and let him rest. But I said, okay, let's go. And he was actually the happiest. There was so much hope in my eyes, and I know my kids' eyes. He was smiling. He was having fun. We had a barbecue on the beach. We were snorkeling away, and that's one thing actually my son still draws, him and dad snorkeling, favorite memories, and I will always be grateful for that day. And I remember getting back onto the ferry back to Lahaina, and we're holding hands, and he looks at me. He's like, when we go home, let's get some books about marriage, and let's read a chapter every night. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea, because He never wanted to go see any therapy or anything like that. But I say, hey, that's a start. Let's do that. And I felt so happy. I felt that he sees the love. He sees my love. He sees the kids' love. There's so much hope. And we go to sleep that night, and we're all in just one room, one bedroom in Maui condo, and he's up all night. And I was like, well, what is he doing? And I was like trying to sleep. And I know he didn't sleep well. And the next morning I get up and I see him on his phone, but there's something more than that. And I will never forget that feeling. I felt this intense darkness, like scary darkness. I felt, I probably should go lay down beside him. But there's something keeping me away from it. There was something that scared me. And I thought, well, he's very angry. He's talking to lawyers. And so I should probably just, he's got to get back to them. And he loved doing jujitsu. So his one mental break was doing jujitsu. He had a trainer in Lahaina. And he says, well, around 12 o'clock, I'm going to go there for an hour session. I'm like, great, that's fantastic, because it's so good for him. And I said, well, I'll take the kids down to the beach. And so I get the kids all lathered up with sunscreen, and I take them to the beach, and we just say, okay, we'll see you later. And as I see my kids swimming in the ocean, I see them having joy, and I'm so glad, because I'm scared. I know where my husband is at, and I didn't like that feeling. But there was a wave, an angel, something told me, it just right over me. And this wave was telling me to pick up my phone and tell my husband that I love him. So I picked it up and I told him, I said, I love you and thank you for the beautiful day yesterday. And this is where I was shocked by the answer, because he said, don't come up, send security. And that was it. I didn't get anything else. I knew then he had never had a cry for help or anything like that. So I took it very serious. And I said, don't do anything. I'm coming up with the kids. And I thought, saying that I'm coming with the kids, like he won't do anything. And I grabbed the kids, and I went through my phone so many times to see how long it took us to get up there. And it was less than 5 minutes. I went up to our condo. I did not let my kids come inside. I told them to wait in the hall. And I paused for a second and just prayed to God to protect me for whatever I was going to see. And I went in and I did find my husband, and he had already, hurt himself. And I then came back out, and I was shaking. And I was calling 911. And my kids are like, oh, what's going on? And I have the 911 lady, and I'm trying to whisper to tell her what I'm seeing, because I don't want to tell my kids what I'm seeing. So I tell the 911 operator, I need to go back in. I need to start CPR. And she said, okay. So I leave again my kids, and I keep thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was going on? My poor kids, I had no clue what was going on. They're seeing their mom shake. I know that's been so traumatic for them. But I really didn't want them to see their dad inside. And I went back and started CPR. And I remember having the 911 on, and how quickly everyone arrived, like fire department, ambulance, paramedics. And I kept doing CPR until paramedics came. And then I went running. I went running to my kids and held them in my arms. And then I just felt my intuition just kind of kicked in to run. I grabbed them and ran to the only person I knew that was there in Maui that I knew at this point, was the beach. He worked at the beach hut. And I ran to him and I told him what happened. I said, I may have to leave my kids with you to talk to the police, I don't want them to see their dad this way, being stretched out to the hospital. And I just think back of my kids and how that day was so traumatizing, to having the police, they had detectives, they had to cover all grounds, make sure I didn't hurt my husband. And so I had to be detectives asking me questions. And so my kids oftentimes had to be either with hotel staffs or my friend. And it was such in shock. I was so in shock, and I was on this island. We're not home. We don't have all our people. And I was paralyzed. I really was, and took it in shock. And I thought I had saved my husband. The paramedics had said he still had a heartbeat, and they were going to take him to the hospital, which is 45 minutes away in Maui. And I decided to stay with my kids. I said, well, you take him and let me know all the tests. But they had told me that he was clinically brain dead, but we were still going to do some tests on him. And I visited him for 3 days at the hospital. And every day that I went, even though the doctors said, well, he can't hear you, he's clinically brain dead, I spent hours and hours talking to him, forgiving him, telling him how much he's loved, because I'm a firm believer that, his soul was still there and he could see the love now. Actually, they asked me if, there's always a chaplain in the hospital, and they said, do you want her to come and pray for your husband? I said, yes. And as we're both have our hands on my husband and praying, there was a tear. There's a tear that came down. And I know he saw, I know he can see the love. He can finally see what I was talking about when I kept asking him, come to church with us, come and pray, come for even just a walk, come outside in nature. I was trying to get him out of where that darkness was, just bring in a little bit of light. But I think he was so consumed, that darkness, once that darkness kind of hits, and his environment, his choices kept on bringing more and more darkness from, it wasn't just overnight. He started, chronic back pain. So you're prescribed an opiate. And I'm not against medication, but it's an adjunction. What's the root cause? Why are you getting the chronic pain? Let's get to that. And so it was then, okay, constant pornography, that's another bringing on darkness, right? And there's his environment, his nutrition. Nutrition was poor. There was just one thing after another that just kind of spiraled him, probably in a lot of guilt and shame and fear. I know his chronic back pain caused him a lot of fear, a fear of losing his business, a fear of losing me. So I think that kept him spiraling in his thoughts there.
Suicide is, it's a really hard thing to contemplate. And it just makes me so sad, especially a dad with an awesome wife and kids, and I've got to imagine, as a dad myself, that when you say he was in a dark place, it had to have been a really, really dark place, because first of all, it's against our human instinct. Our instinct is to survive, right? So when you're taken that far from human instinct, to think that your wife and your kids will be better off without you there, that is a very distant place. And it just makes me so sad that any human could get to that spot. I was actually had an episode earlier today. We were talking with somebody else and talking about men's health and mental health. And you actually brought up something in one of your other podcasts that hit me, and it goes right in line with this podcast, but I'll bring that up in a second. But in this other one, we started talking through statistics of men and mental health and the rise of suicidal ideation in young men right now. I think between the ages of 18 and 25, it's up like 45%. No. It's up. Suicide itself is up 30% just in the last 14, 15 years. And then of those that take their own life, 80% are men. So I think it's just, there's really, it's a really big problem,
Oh,
and you talk about environment, you talk about all these other things that can contribute to a man feeling like they don't have a space to to really like fix the underlying issues. You talked about pornography and all the stuff that's getting thrown around, how accessible all this stuff is. We can talk about mold and how like there's so many different environmental factors that can lead to a lot of this, but also just the sheer fact that men just feel like they've got to be men and they don't seek help.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just oh man, as a dad, it just makes me so sad. But I'm super impressed with your story specifically. I'm just crazy impressed with how you managed through it all. I don't know that I would have been the same. And for you to, get into breath work and, finding this spiritual element in it, and then finding gratitude in all of it, and finding like the silver linings and the beauty that can be found in all this is pretty remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean,
And
it wasn't overnight, that's for sure. The
yeah,
forgiveness, even, forgiveness within the family feud and all that, because that doesn't matter in the end of the day. We're here now. What are we going to do with it? And allowing more
mhm.
love in is really what's going to heal. And, because I've seen what resentment does too, so I think just a lot of letting go and forgiveness and spending that time to heal in that stillness.
So the phrase that you brought up in one of the other podcasts I listened to was generational curse,
Yes.
and this is generational health podcast. And so we focus on, trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that we can do as parents and others to impact the next generation and in an influential, good, positive way. And you said generational curse. Maybe you could explain that
Yes, I
a little.
love that you bring that up, because more that I have guests on, and the more I look at the history, my husband, I think we're all born with just something that's passed down um, from generation. And I'm talking about more of like the toxic load, of what the parents had. I know for a fact that certain parasites and certain things like mold toxic that could be passed down to your baby, and depending on the
Mhm.
mother's gut health as well, and the father's. So I feel there is generational curses that you're carrying from, it could be, I don't know, I believe in hundreds of years, you're carrying that because they couldn't, they didn't, it's so hard to explain, but in a way it got passed down, and now maybe you're being asked to cut that line. Like for me, that line is cut now. There will not be any more suicide in our family. I will, I'm working so hard to give all the tools, because if I look back at my husband's family history, there's suicide on both sides of the family, both grandparents, and mental health issues and whatnot. And so now it's being silent about it and not talking about it. That wasn't of service. So I feel also the toxic load is passed down. I'm just seeing that even with my son. He was born very colicky. But if I think back of where I was at when I had him, yeah, my husband was really struggling then. And I was not in a good place. And probably my gut health was not ideal. And so he had a lot of gut issues. And then that caused inflammation in his brain. I've had brain scans with Dr. Amon's clinic, and seeing the ties of how our environment, like we had mold in Alaska, there's mold here. So I feel there's a toxic load. Like think of a garbage can, we can't live in a bubble. We have toxins everywhere, the EMS and everything. But we got to titrate once in a while. If that garbage gets overpacked, that's when you get so much inflammation. And inflammation is the root cause of all illness, right? And so I feel if we can, from early on, if we can help bring that inflammation down and be aware of what these toxins are and keep them lower. Like I'm teaching my kids right now to avoid, artificial dyes and seed oils to some degree, not fear it, have a balance. But if we can, I tell them, notice after you go to a birthday party and you have all these dyes, how do you feel? Oh, I've got a headache. My belly hurts. And so just bring that awareness, not so much with fear. I think generationally, yes, I think those curses are passed down. Whatever toxic load your parents had, some of it will be passed down. And more that I dove into our own health issues, I got all of us tested for the MTHFR gene, which makes us a little, it's harder for us to detoxify. So it would, some people could be around mold and detoxify it no problem within 24 hours. Whereas for us, it would take, depending on our toxic load, would take us a little bit longer. So for example, I got tested our mycotoxins and heavy metals. Well, we were in the red in all of it. So we even had this parasite Giardia, and I was like, well, where is that coming from?
You had Giardia without knowing it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we had symptoms, but of course, if you're just treated for the symptoms, for example, for me, fatigue. I had so much fatigue. Well, yeah, I had 2 young ones, under 2, and so they're, well, you're losing your hair. Well, maybe it's your thyroid and this and that. And ultimately, no, it was the mold that we were in. And the Giardia was in our well water in Alaska. But I didn't know. I didn't know this till a decade, till this year. This year we still had all these test results. So I'm just learning, wow, maybe for my husband, for years and years being a dentist and removing amalgams in school and out of school, that mercury level that he must have been really high in. And then on top of that, the mold we had in Alaska. I've had guests on my podcast where if they're surrounded by mold, it caused their kids paranoia, depression, OCD behaviors, all these ailments that could have been sought at something else, and just treating the symptom. Whereas it was actually the environment, we had to be removed from that environment. So I've learned a lot as to why we were getting these symptoms, like my son, these outbursts of anger. And of course, it's hard to determine because I'm like, well, they've gone through so much trauma. They're the suppressed emotions and all that. But there was something else. The parasites, the mold, causing all that inflammation in the brain for him to get clouded. And the more we get clouded, the more we can't hear God and hear or whatever you want to call it, source energies or something out there. You got to believe in something, because then that would feel pretty lonely. Something is guiding us and bringing in more of that light in. And so I'm still learning, but I'm also seeing that environment plays a much bigger role. And I don't see it as like, oh, my family member had this, so I'm predisposed for this. I said, I feel you can really, if you kind of alleviate the inflammation and you are on top of making sure your container, your body is healthy, you can keep a lot of these things at bay, including your mental health,
100%. That's great. Yeah. I've got cousins in Alaska, in Wasilla.
Oh, really? Wow. I don't hear that often. I'm actually heading there Wednesday. I'm taking my kids up there.
So how old are your kids now?
They're 9 and 11.
9 and 11. Mm-hmm. My first cousin is the head coach at Colony High School.
Oh, really?
So football coach. I've driven through there one time. It's absolutely stunning. Like it's so beautiful up there. And I didn't know there were like big mold problems up there though. That's pretty interesting. And even the water, I think it would be like the well water. But that's something that's really interesting to look into, especially for people that live on some of these, maybe agricultural type properties. I think you lived on a big piece of property up
50
there.
acres. Yeah, we were 50 acres. So they say from the moose. So we had a lot of moose coming.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, Wasilla, Alaska is really high in Giardia. I'm like, what? I've never heard of it. The 16 years I lived up there. But not only that, I think with Alaska, as you may know, the darkness and
that's tough.
The mental health up there. I mean, I always told my husband, I was like, we are leaving before middle school. I would see at Wasilla High, Colony. I had a niece and a nephew go through there. I mean, I know it's everywhere, but it's pretty prominent for mental health up in Alaska. I thought it'd be a healthy state, but it really isn't. There's a lot of alcohol issues and drugs and not enough for people to do for those long 8 months of darkness.
Well, you just look at if you look up anything around hormone regulation, the number one most important thing that all of us can do is get proper sleep.
Yes.
100%. Like if there's one biohack of all biohacks, even before probably nutrition and exercise, is sleep.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm so
And
particular. My kids, I'm all like, okay, everyone out of the house. Like when we have play dates during school weeks, I'm like, out of the house by 7. My kids need a little downtime, sleep by, like, I am like a sleep Nazi because I'm like, it's so important,
but in Alaska, it's so hard to do that.
It is.
Your circadian rhythm will never be normal up there
the
because
first
both
year
the summertime and the winter time, right?
Yes. The first, sorry to interrupt, the first summer I was there, I had insomnia.
Yeah.
Couldn't sleep. And how often I gave myself and my kids a little melatonin because we couldn't just like calm down, or I had to buy these special drapes in my master and I'd come and read for the kids in there and then bring them to their rooms. But I'd buy these blackouts blinds I'd put up during the summertime. I do feel the circadian rhythm is all over the place.
That's that can really mess people up, and probably cause it will only exacerbate if your hormone regulation is off, your circadian rhythm's off, especially over a long period of time. That's going to add to just a melting pot of chronic problems, And so I see that with like your story and, this generational thing. And I'm sure there's so much that plays into that. And it's so complicated. You can't like pinpoint an exact reason why this or that. But I think it's really smart what you're doing. But I also think it's on the flip side. We live here in Arizona, Valley of the Sun. But this whole month we're all stuck inside because it's 110, 115 degrees outside. And I feel like I get a little bit of seasonal sadness during the summer here because we can't really enjoy the outside stuff because we're just kind of in the air conditioned, car or inside. It's probably not as extreme as Alaska, but it's just like just being outside and nature. There's just so much to that. And a lot of the stuff that you talked about, I mean, you talk about environmental health, but you also brought up a couple of times emotional suppression. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts around emotional suppression? I'm assuming you addressed it in your book too.
Yes.
But like, what do you mean by that?
I mean by just not talking about or being able to express your true emotions. Like for a lot of men, anger is a safe one maybe to express, but never sadness, that's a weakness. So whenever you do feel sad, is probably you suppress it and maybe anger shows up, under that. And I feel for me, for a lot of, or men and women, when you suppress your voice, more you quiet your voice, you're like, well, I don't want to burden anyone. I don't want to, cause conflict. That was me. I just never avoided conflict. I really didn't like it. So you just stay quiet. But I realized that affected my gut. That affected me on a physical aspect. And now that I do breath work, I realize that a lot of the stored emotions are in the belly region. So using these expanded breath to move through these stored emotion, like The Body Keeps the Score, the book, The Body Keeps the Score, a lot of it is kept in the gut. And if you keep these emotions, you suppress them and you hide them and never have a safe place to titrate them, there's like a volcano, either through chronic illness, addictions. A lot of times people don't want to feel, so they suppress, right? With alcohol, all the things, ways that we can suppress, just even from constant TV. Or I see so many people when they're going through something hard, they want to keep so busy so they don't feel. And that's not okay either. You got to give yourself that space and where you can feel safe, but sometimes you just don't feel safe in that space to truly feel and see themselves. Ultimately, you want to go within to see all of you, all the parts of you without any shame, because I've seen what suppressed emotions over time will do and cause either the chronic illness. For me was the cyst on my vocal cords. Then I knew God is telling me use my voice, and then from all the gut issues to the point where I was only eating crackers and bone broth. And I was, ENTs were like, "Oh, you have GERD." I'm like, I exercise like 4 or 5 days a week. I eat pretty well. Like it just didn't make sense. So I know that was all emotional. I was living in fear. I was living in just a suppression of emotions. And for my husband was the numbing agents, by the end of his alcohol and probably 10 different pharmaceuticals that he was on. And it was just a lot of numbing just so he wouldn't feel, And so I'm just here to use my voice, say, there will be freedom. There will be more light. When you're in that darkness, sometimes that's hard to see any light, any hope. But there is, but it's taking that first step, either telling someone you need help or one small win a day that you can see, one thing that you're grateful for, as hard that might be, because you might think everything's awful. But allow one light, something that will bring light in, because light will fight darkness. So you have to make these small switches. If it's 1 minute a day or 2 minutes a day, exercising, finding your community, people that you feel safe to share with, that'll be there for you. I've had therapists, I've breath work, just actually reading. I listened to so many podcasts and reading from people's stories, and I started implementing what they were doing, and it works. It truly works. Now to the point where I see it when I'm not following all my little regimens that I do, my morning meditation and prayer and breath work. I'm kind of off. My days doesn't go as well. And whereas when I'm in alignment, doors open I could have never dreamt about, where I'm at now. My husband died in March 2022. And within that time, now I've just finished writing my second book. It's in editing. I've been a few TV documentary series where I can share my voice. I have my podcast. Like, I would have never been able to dream all of that. But I think because, by sharing my voice, hopefully I can inspire somebody else that, you can get out of that darkness and that space, but you be mindful of the environment and the decisions that you make, that allow more darkness to come in.
So you have a lot of routines, it sounds like, and you got like your morning routine and all this. Is there, like, especially going from March 2022 to today, is there any single thing that you would say everyone should be doing that would help them? There's a lot of us have dealt with loss. We've dealt with, your situation is incredibly tragic, but even just the day-to-day of just a tough day at work or a tough situation with a family member or whatever else. If there was one thing that you would say everyone should be doing this because it will help you out a lot, what would that be?
Oh, hands down for me is breath work. Breath work, because it connects to your heart, kind of quiets the mind, the ego, and it aligns you to your true purpose. And ultimately, it's finding your true purpose, right? Will fulfill you and give you the joy, the freedom, that peace that you want to feel. So breath work has allowed that for me. I still remember the first session that I had with a counselor. It was a day after my husband passed. And at this point, my heart was palpitating to the point where I thought I was having a heart attack. I had called my doctor. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. So I have this Zoom counseling session with this gentleman. And he's like, let me guide you for a 10-minute breath work. I was like, oh, okay. I had never done it. And I closed my eyes for those 10 minutes and I opened them up and I couldn't believe it. I said, I felt this calm, this peace. And I said, I felt God. I truly did. And I knew right away that I needed to continue doing that to survive, because I couldn't live where I'm on fight and flight for a really long time. I know I was going to get sick, and I had to really start taking care of myself. And I think, and the nice thing, breath work, it's free, free. If you have it with you everywhere you go. If you learn the tools, you can do it anywhere. I started off with just Spotify and listening to podcasts for breath work or YouTube. And then once I moved here, I started going to classes. And then I was like, okay, I got to learn more and become an instructor as well. So that's why I'm such a believer. And now being able to gift that back, that's been so powerful. From being able to, so the vision of me finding my husband haunted me for about a year. When I moved here, I'd go to the gym, I'd go to the grocery store, and all of a sudden it would just come right to my face, and I'd have to leave because I was going to start bawling. I was going to cry. It felt really uncomfortable. I was in a breathwork session, and I remember vividly where I was really caught off guard. The vision came right to my face, and I was like, "Whoa, what is it there?" And then it was like, it was saying, let it go, let it go. And I just saw it go away, and it never haunted me again. You know, it really helped with PTSD. I know it does for so many. And so I think it's just a really powerful tool. I think just being on top of my health, my body as well, you know, just realizing that toxic load, you know, I'm really big advocate for uh, getting your labs done on a regular basis, especially men, women, as you age, seeing where your hormone levels, because that plays a big role in your mental health. For women, if you're off balance with progesterone, testosterone, or estrogen, that's going to play a big role in your anxiety. And same for men, the energy. So I think it's important to see where you're at. And then for me, it's like, okay, the root cause. Well, let me see. Let's get some tests. And unfortunately, a lot of times, some of these things are not covered, but it's so worth it. Don't you want to live where you have full of energy and joy and you feel good? Yeah.
And a lot of it's preventative.
Yes.
So it's almost like you might feel like you think you're okay or you feel like you're normal. But until you got tested, you didn't know you had giardia, which is serious.
Yeah.
Or, could be hormones. It could be GI mapping. It could be allergy testing, right? A lot of these things, it's more about getting ahead of it so that you don't get so out of whack that then something catastrophic happens.
Yeah, like cancer, right? Ultimately, you want that inflammation down.
Mm-hmm.
So then these markers are, you don't get to that point. So I'm always been about preventative, though. That was always me, early mid-20s. I think my mom has been in a big influence of just supplements, seeing naturopath. I was 20, I was flight attendant and getting vitamin B shots because, you're always in a cosmic radiation and all that. And so I've always been really big into health and preventative health, even dental hygiene. That's what we do, is preventative health,
Mm-hmm.
and come to that awareness as well. Now I'm really passionate to show the root cause of the oral biomes. It's all correlated,
Mm. So you have this book.
Yes.
What's the name of the book?
The Truth Behind the Smiles.
The Truth Behind the
Yes.
Smiles. And when did you write this one?
I wrote it actually in Mill Valley, California. I wrote it with my publisher, Kira Brinton, in 2024, January 2024.
Okay. And you said you have another one coming out.
Yes. Yeah.
When's that one supposed to come out?
So hopefully, my editor has it right now. So hopefully in the fall here, October, November.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I also saw on your Instagram that you're part of like a reality show as well.
Yeah, it's a documentary series.
Okay,
it's called Writer's Island.
Mm-hmm.
And my publisher got offered this TV series because they see what she does. When I wrote my book, I wrote it in 5 days, 48,000 words in 5 days, but I couldn't have done it without Kira. She helps you channel your book and make sure you don't burn out as you're writing and do a lot of nervous system reset. So that's what we did in those 5 days. So she was offered a TV documentary series to showcase how we do that. Because a lot of people will take 5-7 years to write books, and it's a really long process. So the documentary series shows that we write our books on this beautiful island in the BVI. It's called the Ariel Resort, and that place was so sacred. And I love meeting the owner of the island, Brittany Turner, as well. And it was an unreal, we were all these authors from all different places, all have big stories, and to see what came out of this next book. And we're pretty much showcasing that we pray, we channel our books, and what divinely needs to be written and voiced, to change lives. So my next book is actually called The Gut-God Connection.
Okay.
Yeah. And and a lot of it is through our own health journeys, showing how these environments that we were around, mold, or, parasites, as well as just how all of these really played a role in our mental health. It was all in the stored emotions, and how more you get clouded, through these environmentals, the less you can hear God or any spiritual aspect that you want to call it. And to have that clarity, you just really have to take care of your gut health.
So what's our time? Um, so maybe just to your own regimen with nutrition.
Mhm.
You talk about kind of your gut health and taking care of yourself. Do you follow any particular nutrition type plan or?
Just more nutrient dense, like just color. Like I always say, let's eat the rainbow, a lot of colors. I'm definitely a protein eater. I love, but grass fed and wild salmon. And so a variety, just organic as much as I can. Local farms. Luckily where I live, there's a local farm right there.
Mhm.
I go to the little shop and I try to buy local because I feel like the closer it is, the more light there is. And also, it's not just the food, is how you eat it too. Think of all the grandmothers, back in the day cooking the meals for Sunday dinners and things like that. That has a lot of light and love in your food too. So it's how you eat it in community as well is so important. So I love that. I've been starting as well, just Sunday brunch and having people around because there is something about that, that brings a lot to your health and mental health. But yeah, I just a diversity, mostly, you know, I do gluten free just because of like gut health issues. I'm still kind of for our gut health, I had to avoid gluten. I love dairy. I love cheese, but try and avoid it here and there. But yeah, it's all about balance. I'm
Mhm.
not so strict. I don't go veer off. I think a lot of it is having harmony and just not too much. There's never black and white. This is one thing I write in my next book is there's never black and white. Just have a balance, and sometimes you need to kind of, we're a little off balance, a little too much in the work department. We need to come back and more, okay, family work balance. It's hard to stay on that balance sometimes.
No, that's great. So pretty much just eat real food
Yes. Yeah.
with great people.
Yes. That's
You're
it.
mixing two really important things and, make for a long and happy life.
Mhm.
Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for coming in. One question I do like to ask people is a little bit about the generational health aspect. And so I would love to know, what does generational health mean to you?
Mm. Oh, for me, if I think back of generational health, I think back of my grandmother and thinking how she loved cooking and having family over and how that is passed down. Like we can't forget that, the importance of home cooked meal with real ingredients and family gatherings. Like let's not forget how we used to do it, in the culture and bring that back into our homes, not keeping ourselves so busy, busy, busy. Like what were we rooted on before, you know? Having our garden and grandma and grandpa picking from there and cooking their meals and having family over. So for me, that's what it is bring that back, you know. Mhm.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time and thanks for coming in. And you got all this cool stuff, books, multiple books and TV shows. Where's the best place for people to find you
Yes,
and
I'm on all
follow?
platforms, but Instagram at Melissa Gratitude. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. And also my website is melissagratitude.life.
Yeah, that's what I said. I don't even, your last name.
I just
It's gratitude.
gratitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you so much.